Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. What's the deal with raising children? I have 4 children, one in college, one about to go into college, and 2 in high school. So I know a lot about raising children. My wife and I have been at it for, it seems like an eternity, but it's only been about 20 years. However, I was also raised by parents who were very, very good at raising children. So I had a great example. So I know an awful lot about this subject. The number one thing to understand about raising children is that you need to raise your child to be a moral person. You have a responsibility to see to it that that child can obtain eternal life. So the child should be raised in the church, and more specifically a Christian church, if not the Roman Catholic Church. So children should be raised to believe in Jesus as the Son of God and the Savior of humanity, and that there is a heaven and the possibility of eternal life and bliss in heaven for them. You're not doing a child any favor if you're raising them to be immoral people who will only end up in hell. That's a terrible thing to do as a parent. So that's the number one thing to avoid. So, first thing in raising children, take them to church. Take them to church every week. You have to instill moral discipline in your children. Taking them only on Christmas and Easter or never isn't going to instill them with morality. They're going to end up being evil people. So take them to church every week. Something like the Roman Catholic Church is great because it's free. Sure, they ask for donations, but you give them whatever you want. They're not going to kick you out. And every week you instill this discipline. Hey, we have to go every week. This is a requirement. They learn discipline by doing that. At Mass, they learn about right and wrong, good and evil, who God is, what God promises, how to behave like a moral human being. And it's reinforced in them every week from birth. And you want them there from birth because these concepts will live more fully and inside them if they've learned them from birth. And they'll be less likely to abandon those beliefs later in life if they've learned them growing up as children. And you want that. You want to instill that sense of belonging with the church to these children. The church is also another family that your children will always have, even when you and your wife have passed on. Your children still have the family of God, so they still have a parent role model in the form of Jesus, God the Father. That's a father figure, or Jesus's mother, Mary, who is a mother figure. And they will have that their entire lives. Even if they're 80 years old, they will still have that church family to draw hope and support from. It's very important. Make sure your children are brought up with religious education, whether that's in a religious school or some sort of outside religious program. The Catholic Church has CCD, and make sure they get the sacraments that are offered. Communion, First Communion, penance, confirmation. This is the most important thing to understand when raising children. You've got to get them involved as members of a Christian church. Very, very fundamentally important. Um, the church teaches charity. When you go to church and you give your donation, make sure your kids see you do that, or better yet, give some money to your kids so that they can put it in the basket, so that they learn what charity is and to give as well. Uh, you know, the belief in God and Jesus as his son and the Savior of humanity is an extremely important belief that you need to keep with you your entire life. And that belief is first introduced to children when they're, basically born, and you take them to church every week. Um, the belief in God and Jesus will be a continuous support and reservoir of hope for your child through adolescence and into adulthood until they die, until the day they die. It's a great thing to have. It can prevent them from doing a lot of bad things when you have that belief and hope to draw from. So don't belittle going to church. It is extremely important for both you, but for your kids especially, extremely important. Now, it's good that, let's say, one parent goes to church, but it's more important that both do, and especially the father. The father is often the reason the child stays as a Christian later in life or not. If the father went to church, the odds are like 90% that the child will continue to go to church later in life. If the father doesn't go to church, then the statistics plummet, and it ends up being like 20% of the children continue to attend church later in life. The father is extremely important. Father should go to church every week, and if the father is not going to church every week, that father is doing a terrible, terrible disservice and evil to his own children. Maybe he doesn't realize it, but hey, maybe you watch this video and you realize what I'm telling you is true. Church also is a chance for socializing. There's other kids at church that your children could get to know, maybe in CCD or in the Christian school they attend to. And, so that they're surrounded by other children who think like them, which supports their beliefs and gives them good role models to base their behavior off of. Church also gives you detailed teachings about Jesus and good versus evil and how you should behave as a human being and as a child of God and how to be a good person. You got to understand that in our society today, our secular society, no one's teaching our kids how to be good people. Public schools won't touch it. So who's going to teach it to them? Well, the parents should, but sometimes the parents aren't that well versed in it themselves. The church knows what they're talking about. So that's where you send your kids to learn about good and evil. And that's really important. The greatest regret a parent could have is raising an evil child. There's no taking that back. And at church, your children will partake in spiritual growth. Confirmation, the Holy Spirit is there to help them, and in the blessed sacraments like First Communion, body and blood of Christ will strengthen them as human beings. You only get that at church. The church also, the Catholic Church in particular, teaches that divorce is immoral, wrong. You shouldn't do it. You want your kids hearing that and understanding that, because our secular society will teach just the opposite, which is, oh, it's okay, get divorced, no big deal. It doesn't matter what happens to the kids, or oh, you don't even have to get married. You can live together. It's no big deal. Well, the church is going to tell your kids, don't get divorced, don't live together. And you want to make sure your children understand that that's how they should live their life. That is the moral and correct way to live. They're not going to learn that anywhere else. Okay, so number one, raising children. Take them to church every week for as long as they live with you. From birth until however long they live with you. Take them to church every week. And insist that they go to church every week themselves when they're not living with you. All right. Children also need a sense of stability and permanence. That means, as parents, you shouldn't be moving around from place to place to place every couple of years. That's not stable. Your children won't get a sense of permanence, of the stability and lack of anxiety that they need if you're constantly moving around. Now, I know that, especially private sector employers, they don't care whether you move around the country. In fact, they prefer that you do, because it benefits their bottom line. It benefits them, but it doesn't benefit you or your kids. In fact, it hurts them. So don't do that. Try to maintain some sort of permanency and stability in a particular geographic location while your kids are growing up. See if you can get a single family home in a neighborhood that has a lot of other kids in it that are the same age as your children. New developments are great for this. If you see a new development opening up, lots of times the people buying those new houses are young couples who are starting to have kids. You get in that sort of development, and your neighborhood's going to be surrounded with children the same age as your children, and they'll have lots of friends and people that they can grow up with. And that's a great thing for them, that sort of environment. Don't put your kids in daycare. Don't do it. Raise your own children. If you let somebody else raise your children, that person's getting paid. They don't really care what this person turns out to be like. And they're not going to impress upon that child what you believe and what your morals are, and your understandings of how things should be. You're giving it to somebody else. You're giving it to a nanny who's being paid. She doesn't really care, or he doesn't really care. You only get so much time to teach your children, where they'll listen to you. And it starts from birth, and it ends probably around 18. And that's that window of time you have to influence them. After that, they've made up their own mind, and whatever it is you taught them, that's going to stay with them. But don't expect to teach them anything new that'll stick. So you get this window of time in which to influence your child, and take advantage of it. And having your kid raised by somebody else in daycare, you're losing that that window of time to influence them. And that window of time is critical. If you want to raise a moral, good person, you've got to raise your own child and take advantage of that window of time you have to influence the child, because after that, it's over. And then you lose control over what they do. If you don't raise your own kids, how are your kids going to know who you are? They won't. They'll know who the nanny is, but they won't know who you are. Or they'll know who their grandparents are, but they won't know who you are. So I know there's financial pressure to put your kids in daycare, and I know employers would prefer that you put your kids in daycare, but employers prefer all sorts of things that just benefit them and will harm your kids. They don't care about your kids. Don't kid yourself. Employers do not care about your children. They do not the least bit. So don't listen to them on issues like daycare. You got to be intelligent enough to figure out that your employer has their own interest in heart, not yours. So maybe you shouldn't listen to them. That's another thing about work. Work is about money, making money. Money affects everything that's important, but it's not the most important thing in life. It's important, but it's not the most important thing. Your children are more important than money. No doubt about it. They're more important than work. They're more important than your career. If you don't understand that, maybe you shouldn't have kids. So you need to subordinate your working career to your children, to raising your children. They're far more important. What child wants to grow up thinking that, mommy or daddy loved work and their career more than they loved me? I mean, what kind of child are you raising if that's what they're thinking? This child's going to have problems. And you shouldn't do that. Raising children. Don't get divorced. In fact, I should write that on the board. No divorce. Divorce is a terrible, terrible thing to inflict on children. They never get over it. You're teaching them that, first of all, divorce is moral because their parents did it. So you're setting a bad example, a terrible example. Later in life, they're not going to respect marriage. And Jesus says you're not allowed to get divorced. So you're imperiling your own soul and the soul of your children if they think it's okay to get divorced. These are all evil and terrible things. Don't get divorced. I know sometimes it's not your decision to get divorced. Your spouse wants a divorce, and you can't do anything about it. It's a no fault divorce. Yeah, I understand, and I feel sorry for you that happened to you. But try the best you can to avoid that from happening, because this is such a harmful thing to do to children. There's hardly anything that you could do that's worse than this in raising children, getting divorced. Also, don't live together. No living together. That means if you're going to have kids, make sure you're married first. None of this living together stuff. Because what are you doing to your children if your mommy and daddy didn't get married? Well, you're showing them that there's a lack of commitment between their parents. That creates insecurity in the child's mind. Oh, my parents didn't get married. I guess that means that they could separate at any time. Don't put those sort of fears in a child's mind. It's a terrible thing to do. Terrible. Not to mention the fact that it's immoral. This is fornication. Uh, you're imperiling your soul and the soul of your children if you do this. Don't do this. This is bad. When you have children, some people only want to have one kid. Well, that's a decision between a couple, how many children they want to have. And there could be medical issues also involved. But I would recommend having, I had 4 kids, so I would recommend 4. That way, each kid has a same-sex sibling and an opposite-sex sibling. If you're lucky enough, like I was, to have 2 boys and 2 girls. Of course, you can't choose the sex of your children, so it's a lottery in many respects, and there may be nothing you can do about it. But ideally, you would want each child to have a same-sex sibling and an opposite-sex sibling. And the children should all be around, closer in age. So you should have your kids closer in time. That way, they can have a better relationship with their siblings who isn't too old for them to relate to each other. Get a pet, a dog, cat. That's great to have. Kids love pets, and it teaches them some responsibility for taking care of another living thing. They're fun. They make things enjoyable. You should go on vacations, family vacations. Very important. Go on a vacation once or twice a year. Make one a good one, like a 2-weeker. It's a great. It keeps the family happy. You don't want a miserable family. So do enjoyable things periodically. Vacations are great, and they don't have to be too expensive, depending on where you go. But kids get new experiences. You go to different places. They learn new things. Maybe you go to different countries. They learn what other cultures are like. That's a great thing for a child. It's a learning experience too. It's enjoyable and it's a learning experience, and they're spending 24/7 with their parents as opposed to maybe just some of the day, and that's a lot of bonding time. So vacations are great. Holidays are great to celebrate. Birthdays, holidays, celebrate them all. Have your own family traditions. Birthday cakes and gifts, and you go out to see the Rockettes in New York or something like that. Stockings and presents under the tree and all those sorts of things. Easter baskets. It's a wonder. It's a nice time of year. It's a time where you get to spend time with your family, so that you can enjoy it and you can understand why you're doing it. And it keeps your family happy and fresh. And you have to keep them happy. Don't expect your family just to be happy because they happen to be your family. No, you gotta entertain them too, and keep things enjoyable in life, so they understand that life can be enjoyable, and that's the kind of life that they should want. You should also concern yourself with the education of your children. Give them the best education you can, because what you know ends up being what you do. And if you don't know a lot, whatever you're going to do isn't going to be a lot either. So quality education is extremely important. And education is one of those things where, most of it occurs early in life, from birth to, 18 or 4 or 7 more years after graduating high school. And that's basically it. That's your opportunity to learn really as much as you can. And you should try to have your kids learn as much as they can in that period of time. Learning will serve them their entire lives. It makes life more enjoyable. They can do more because they know more. There's really no downside to furthering your education. None. You may have to pay for some of it, but it's worth it. Usually it's well worth it. So find a good school system. Uh, Public schools, I put my kids in public schools from kindergarten to 8th grade because it was free. And I didn't have the money for a private school. But after 8th grade, you have these teenagers, and that's when a lot of them start behaving badly. And a lot of public high schools have terrible kids in them, terrible role models for your kids. And you may want to think seriously about not letting your children go to public high schools. Instead, send them to a private Catholic school or a private school where the peers will be much better role models than the kids in the public schools. Now, maybe you have a great public school, and you can safely send them to a public high school. Okay. And it's free, that's great. But if you don't have that sort of situation, seriously think about private high schools. Be very careful where you send your kids for an education, whether it's a high school or college, because they're going to be exposed to their peers, and a lot of those peers are immoral people, and your kids can pick up a lot of evil and bad behavior if they're in a bad environment. And so avoid schools, high schools, colleges that create bad environments or have a lot of non-Christian children or kids or young adults attending. That's that could destroy your children. Be very, very careful of who you allow your children to be exposed to. Their peers can, you can only do so much as a parent, and if your kids are in a bad environment with peers who are giving them bad ideas, some of those ideas are going to rub off on your kids, and your kids are going to be worse for it, and maybe get in a lot of trouble that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten into if you had sent them to a better place with a better environment. So always be concerned about who your kids' friends are, or who it is that they're being exposed to. You don't want to expose them to bad kids, bad elements. Be very, very vigilant against doing that. Their peers can exert a tremendous amount of influence over them, and that they'll counteract a lot of your good parenting if you allow them to be in that sort of environment. So don't do it. Children should be taught about the importance of work, physical labor. Make them do chores. Work around the house, whether it's mowing the lawn or washing their own clothes or making dinner or cleaning the bathroom or vacuuming or whatever. Get them involved in physical labor so they have an appreciation for that, so that they become, so that they get a good work ethic later in life, which will serve them in seeking employment and keeping and holding a job. And you can pay them, some sort of allowance for that hard work, but get them involved in physical labor and hard work. Part-time jobs during the school year or summer jobs are great for kids. Give them a sense of, how is it that I earn money? So they learn how to earn money. And learn that everything just isn't handed to you, that you have to earn it. And that can take a lot of hard work. You want them to learn. You want them to have a strong work ethic. And you can build that up while they're children. It's also important that children have a sense of importance. So they need to be important to you. They need to understand that they are important to you and your wife or your spouse. They need a healthy sense of self-esteem. So not only do they have to be important to you, and they have to understand that they're important to you, but if they have a talent of some sort or multiple talents, pursue them with them. Make sure your kids pursue their talents. It gives them a sense of self-esteem and self-importance. And That'll make them feel good about themselves and give them some motivation in life. So if your kid has a talent for something or multiple talents, let them pursue it. Maybe give them instruction to make them better at it. That's important. It's important to a child's self-esteem. Uh, you know, my kids are all smart. They are. And I tell them that. I want them to have a healthy sense of self-esteem when it comes to their own intelligence. And that's very, very important. Make sure that they understand that they're smart and, they can get straight A's. You know, if they don't get if they get a B or C, just tell them, hey, look, that's beneath you. You should be able to get an A. You're so smart. So tell them that they're smart. Encourage them in terms of academics to get straight A's. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they'll never if they don't think they're smart. So validate their intelligence. You want to grow dumb kids or smart kids? You want to grow smart kids, so you better be validating their intelligence. You should keep your children informed about what's going on in your house, in your life, and around the world. Don't sugarcoat things. Tell them the truth. Let them understand what's really going on. Because otherwise, you're just keeping them dumb. That's not going to help. You don't want to raise mushrooms. How do you raise mushrooms? Keep them in the dark and feed them manure. You don't want to do that to your children. Keep them well informed. Now, I'm not saying you expose them to things that only adults should see, or maybe things even adults shouldn't see. I'm not saying expose them to that sort of stuff, but keep them informed as to reality and what's going on and if people are behaving badly, let them know that you think this person is behaving badly, because see, you're their role model for these children, and if you say something's okay, they're going to believe you, and if you don't say anything at all, they're going to think that you think it's okay, even though you may not. So let them know. Let them know if you think something is bad or evil, so that they are clear about what you think. And that way they know what they should think. Or at least where you stand on the position. Very important. Parents are a role model, and children, they imitate their parents, and they learn from what their parents do. And that's a heavy responsibility for a parent. And children will, they will always figure out who's the weaker parent, who's more likely to, let them do this or that, or who's the one who doesn't quite feel as strongly about whether something is immoral or not. And that's the one they'll gravitate to. That's the parent they'll gravitate to. They'll be like, well, Dad thinks this is wrong, but Mom thinks it's okay, so I guess it's okay. That's what they'll do. So as parents, you've got to maintain a united front. You've got to be on the same page on important issues, so that you don't put your children in a position where they can pick and choose their morality based on which parent is behaving a certain way. So you got to stay as a united front, as a mother and father. Stay on the same page. You should eat your meals together as a family, especially dinner. And you should pray before dinner. That's a sense of belongingness in family life. That's fundamental. Who you eat your meals with are the most important people in your life. So if you're eating your meals with your children, you're telling them, you're the most important people in my life and in your mother's life. That's the message you want to give them. Because if they don't think that they're the most important people in your life, then um, they're not being adequately loved, and they're going to have problems later in life. You're not teaching them well. Um, Make sure your neighborhood is safe. Don't raise children in an unsafe neighborhood. If there's criminal activity going on in your neighborhood, then get the heck out of that neighborhood. Move. Go somewhere safe. Do not expose your children to unsafe neighborhoods. I don't care what you have to do to get them out of there. Get them out! Pay very close attention to who your kids' friends are. Very, very close attention. Don't let them hang out with loser kids who have bad behaviors and aren't good kids and teach your kids bad things. Forbid your kids from even associating with those kids, because these peers, your children's peers, have a huge impact on what your child thinks and how your child behaves. You have a huge impact as parents, but so do the peers. So be extremely vigilant of who those children's peers are. Who are you letting your children be exposed to? Keep an eye on that. A very close eye. Don't let your children date until at least 16 years of age. That should be really a no-brainer. But you'd be surprised. Some people in our society, they seem to have no morals whatsoever. And they don't care what age their child dates at. Well, this is crazy thinking. Your child shouldn't be dating at least until they're 16. At bare minimum. In fact, it probably should be older than that. But you don't want them. These are kids. They're still learning. They don't need to be that actively involved in adult activities like dating and relationships. There's plenty of time for that later on in life. You don't have to have your kids involved in that. Not to mention where that could lead. That's not going to lead anywhere good. Plus, it's a distraction from school and from things that they should be learning. Boyfriends and girlfriends. Why? Why? Why do you need that so young? You don't. Keep in contact with your extended family and let your kids, have time with their cousins or uncles or aunts or grandparents or whatever. It gives them a sense of an extended family, extended support system. It can only help them. Unless, of course, some of these people are badly behaved, then don't let your kids near them. You don't want them thinking this person is a role model now because they happen to be related to you, even though they behave badly. That you don't want to risk your kids getting the wrong idea if you have somebody like that in your family. You can keep your kids away from them. Watch your kids like a hawk, especially when they're young. When they're young, kids can get into trouble so quickly, and physical trouble too. Physical dangerous trouble. You gotta keep your eye on them, because guess what? Nobody else is watching but you. So if that kid gets in trouble, some sort of physical trouble, the first person who's going to catch it is you. And it may be that if somebody doesn't catch it in time, that kid's going to have some serious injuries or worse. So keep an eye on your kids like a hawk, especially when they're young. They get older, that's okay, because they become more independent, they're smarter, they know not to do dangerous things. You don't have to watch them nearly as hard as you do when they're younger. When they're young, you better keep an eye on them. They get in trouble like that. Just like that. Be careful, I'm telling you. And be careful who you let watch them. If you're like, hey, can you watch my kid for the next half hour? Make sure the person you're telling that to is trustworthy. Because lots of people, they don't watch your kids. They may say, oh, yeah, I'll watch your kids. But, they're looking some other way while your kid's getting in trouble. They're not even paying attention because they're just not good at watching kids. Some people say they're good at watching kids, but they're not. So be very careful who you give the responsibility to watch your children. Make sure you know that person is responsible. Otherwise, you could be endangering your child to somebody who just, they're not really watching. You can give your children more and more freedom. The older and smarter they get, the better able they are to handle it. And truly, the older they get, the smarter they get, and they become easier to take care of because they can take care of themselves for the most part. And that's just the way it is. But when they're young, they need your help constantly, and you've got to be there to give it to them. But as they get older, you can absolutely give them more freedom and responsibility. Absolutely. If you get one of these neighborhood houses in a nice neighborhood, try to give your kids their own bedroom, each their own bedroom if you can do that. Give them their own space, their own private space that they can go. Have 2 or 3 bathrooms in the house. One bathroom dedicated to where the kids go to bathroom, or use the sink or sinks. Give them some sense of independence in that way. Plus, at least they're not in your bathroom, right? Give them their own. That helps. That helps you as a parent. If the kid, wants something, and let's say it's real expensive, let them figure out how to get it. You don't have to buy them whatever they ask for. There's no good parenting is not just buying your children whatever they want, no matter how much it costs. That's called raising a spoiled kid. Don't do that. Just say no. I'm not giving you this. You should you should say no to your child at least 3 times every day. Don't be afraid of telling your child no. Who do they think they are? The world doesn't revolve around them. So they got to understand in life that things just aren't handed to them. And if you're not telling them no, then what do you think their expectations are going to be when they get out in life? They're going to be wrong, because people out in the real world, they're not going to give them anything. They're not going to hand them anything. They're going to have to earn it. So let the child learn how to earn the money in order to buy whatever it is they want. However that is, save up their Christmas money or present money until they have enough to buy whatever it is they want, or buy something cheaper with whatever money they have, or get some sort of job, maybe part-time job, or some way to earn the money themselves. They've got to learn in life that they have to earn money if they want to buy things. So start teaching that at a young age. Say, no, you're not. I'm not buying that for you. You figure out how to buy that for yourself. Maybe you give them some chore where they cut the lawn, you pay them $20 or something like that. And over a period of time, they learn to save and accumulate enough money to buy whatever it is they want. So they're learning savings as well. Not only are they learning how to earn money, they're also learning how to save money. You're doing your child a favor by saying no, because you're forcing them to think how to get something, and you're teaching them important fundamental lessons in life that they're going to need later in life. You should be teaching your children constantly, all the time, teaching them, telling them what they need to know, how to do this or that, what the meaning of this or that is. Constantly talk to them. Don't wait for them to ask you something. Volunteer the information. Don't zip your lips about something with your children, tell them. They need to know things. It's important. It's very important for them as adults that they learn as much as they possibly can from you. Because who's going to teach them once they leave your house and start, living on their own? You're a great source of education for them. Not only do you have the schools that they're going to, but your parents are a great source of education and learning. So don't stay quiet or silent. Constantly teach your kids and say things over and over and over until they get it. Make sure that they understand that our society is divided, and there are a lot of people that they're going to meet in their lives who do not share the same values and morals that they have. And that's just a fact. And they need to understand this and the differences. So they're not surprised or shocked when they run into it. And they know how to identify it and how to deal with it. Otherwise, they may get fooled by it and join in on it. But if you teach them in advance about, what kind of people are out there and what these people are doing and how it's wrong and that they shouldn't do this, they'll be prepared for it when they do encounter it. And they will. If you don't prepare them for it and they encounter it, they may get sucked into that lifestyle. And then you lost them. All the work you did as a parent has been undone by, the creeps out in our society. And there's lots of creeps. They got to be ready for that. Tell them how to deal with them. Tell them how to avoid them. Tell them why they do what they do, so that they understand not to make the same mistakes that those people are making. You can't avoid them. You got to deal with them. Another thing with parenting is if you run into somebody who doesn't appreciate children, maybe it's an employer, some sort of, acquaintance, relative, whatever. Just understand that that person is an That's right. They're an a-hole. You should appreciate children. If you don't, that's what you are. So understand that about people. There's some people, they're just nasty people. They're not nice people. They're not moral people. They're not good people. And they have their opinions. And unfortunately, they won't keep it to themselves. Or they'll act on their bad opinions. And it'll affect you. And there's not a lot you can do about that. But understand that they're wrong and you're right. These people are that. And you're going to run into them. Don't listen to them. Try to avoid them. Ignore them. Do the best you can in handling them. But that's what they are. And there's no formula for avoiding these people entirely in your life. Sorry. You're going to run into them. And you may run into a lot of them. Just recognize what they are and move on. Be very careful about allowing others to label your children. Labels stick. And other people are going to think of your child in terms of that label. And those labels can have serious negative consequences for your child and even for you. So, if I were you, I wouldn't let anyone label my child. at all. Whether it's a doctor, even a doctor, I wouldn't let them label my child, or a psychologist, or psychiatrist, or a school official. Labels are they can be extremely damaging. There's a saying, give a dog a bad name and you might as well hang him. And that's true. Be very careful of labels. I wouldn't let anybody label my child. Unless it was something that was just so, it was obvious and unavoidable. And you simply have to deal with it because it's true. But generally speaking, don't let people label your kids. And if somebody likes to label your children or is talking about labeling your children, you should seriously think about getting that person out of your life. So don't let people label your children. You don't want your child thinking that that's what they are in their own minds, because then they'll limit themselves, and it could affect them their entire life. Very, very dangerous thing to do is label children. Go out shopping with your kids, buying stuff, so that your kids know how to buy stuff, how much things cost. Take your kids, to adult places like, the bank, or car shopping, or wherever it is that you might go that, allows children, so that they learn, how life is lived and what you have to do and how things work. So take them places so they can just observe you. Take them along. You don't have to do anything, but watch you and see what you're doing. You should be teaching your kids constantly. If you're repairing something, let your kids see you do it so that they know how to fix this or that. Or tell them what you're doing, why you're doing it, so that they understand how to do this or that. Teach them constantly. It'll make them far more competent adults if they know how to, do everything that you know how to do. So everything that you know how to do, teach them. You're only doing them a favor. They're going to know more. They'll be more effective adults. Don't be insecure about your parenting skills. Understand that there are a lot of bad parents out there. And it's not that you're wrong, it's that they're wrong. And they don't know what they're doing. And they're raising little monsters. And that's true. So just because some other parent is doing it this way, that doesn't mean they're right and that you should now do what they're doing and follow their example. You'll be following the example of a terrible parent. Don't do that. Just because, the people down the street do it this way, but you think, I don't know, that's morally shaky. That doesn't mean you're wrong. They're wrong. And, even if there's parent after parent of parents saying, oh, no, you should do this, this, this. There's a lot of poorly informed parents out there that don't know what they're talking about, or that they're not on the same moral path that you are. So just because they think one thing, you got to be confident in understanding your own parenting and where it's coming from, and that it's moral, and that they're simply wrong. They just don't know what they're doing, or they're doing something else, and they're raising bad kids. Unfortunately, that happens. There's a lot of bad parents. And just because, some secular doctor or psychologist says this is the way you should raise your kids, that doesn't mean that that's true. You need to raise your kids moral. Christians and Catholics, preferably, first and foremost. If somebody is contradicting basic moral teachings, I don't care if they're a doctor, they're wrong. They're just wrong. They're secularist. They're probably an atheist. They probably don't believe in God anyway. So be careful who you take parenting advice from. Great place to get parenting advice is from parents who have good kids, because they must know what they're doing, right? Ask them if you can't figure it out yourself. Or if you had a good parent, ask your parent what they would do. There's better sources. some things when the kids are little, like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Yeah, we all know that Santa Claus isn't real and the Easter Bunny isn't real. But we tell our kids that they're real when they're young. And that's okay. I've never met anybody later in life who was damaged because of a belief in the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus as a child. In fact, I've never heard anybody ever say that they wish that their parents had never pretended as if Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny were true. It's a nice tradition. Kids like it. It makes their life as small children somewhat magical. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It doesn't cause any damage. It's a fun thing. So I wouldn't be that worried about it. Kids will smarten up later on anyway, or somebody will tell them, you'll tell them, their friends will tell them, the Easter Bunny isn't real. They'll get over it, because by that time they're usually smart enough to have figured out that that's probably the case anyway. But it's not damaging. I've never met anybody later in life who complained about that. Now, there's a difference between the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and God and Jesus. The Easter Bunny and Santa Claus are not real. God and Jesus are real. They're not the same thing. I've posted plenty of videos on casual learning to explain to you why God is real. And so is Jesus. And you can watch them. But you got to understand that when it comes to God and Jesus, that's not the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. God and Jesus are real. Real. And your child should believe that they are real their entire life. And there's logical proofs that you can give them that God is real. Just look at my videos. And that Jesus was a real person. And, hopefully they're learning the Gospels and the Word from going to church, but they can also read it on their own in your Bible, your family Bible. We have a Bible in the house. You should have at least one Bible in the house that they can look at. Preferably give them a Bible. And it's so important, I think, that children be taught that atheists do exist. There are people who don't believe in God, because they're going to run into them. And they're going to run into people in high school or in college who are going to try to argue with them and convince them that God is not real or that Jesus wasn't real. And this is going to happen. And your kids need to be prepared in advance before they get to that situation or that argument with so-and-so about the existence of God or Jesus. They know what the counter-arguments are so that they can feel confident that they have the better argument. And they do. But they've got to know those arguments. So teach it to them. Because otherwise they may get blindsided by somebody in college trying to tell them that there's no God and giving them a whole bunch of atheistic arguments. And a lot of those arguments, they're tricky and they sound good on their face. And they can be convincing. And if you haven't prepared your child in advance so that they understand what these arguments are and what the way out of them is, the solutions, and why the arguments for the existence of God and Jesus are better arguments, they don't understand that, they can easily fall prey to atheism or agnosticism, especially in college. Easily fall prey to it because you haven't prepared them for it. So prepare them. Make sure they understand these arguments and what the answers are. So that doesn't happen to them. The worst thing your child could do is lose faith in God and in Jesus Christ, his son. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to him. And if it happens to him, hopefully it doesn't stay that way. And they get back to the church and where they should be believers. They're imperiling their eternal soul if they don't. And you don't want that as a parent. It's the last thing you want. And again, the arguments for the existence of God and Jesus are better. than any atheistic or agnostic argument they're ever going to come across. But a lot of this stuff, it's their peers are telling them stuff, or they see stuff on the internet. Trust me, they're gonna find out about this stuff, and you better prepare them in advance. And that's part of your job as a parent. So watch my videos. That'll help you. Lastly, for now, on the issue of parenting, as Woody Allen said, showing up is 80% of life. Well, you could say the same thing about parenting. Showing up is 80% of parenting. Showing up is 80% of parenting. Be there as a parent. Be there for your children. Show up so that your kids know what a good parent is. A good parent is there, especially when the child needs them. That's what a good parent is. A good parent shows up 80% of the time. They're there. Now, maybe that annoys your kids because you're constantly there. But that's what a good parent does. If you're distracted with other things, whether it's a job or a career or something else, and you're not there for your kids, you're doing a terrible job of parenting. You need to be there. That's how your kids know that you love them, that you care about them, that they're the most important thing in your life. Show up. Showing up is 80% of parenting. I can't, overstress this more than I possibly could. This is a key to parenting. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and maybe I'll address them in a future video or address them in the comments below. Please press the subscribe button. I appreciate it. Or like this video. That would be helpful. All right. Take care, you future parents.